At this moment, we're going to start by using NURBS to create the tires. First, we're going to add a layer and put the shell there. I'm going to switch that off, and I'm going to go to my top view, and I'm going to turn off my image planes. Something kind of important to remember is that when you're creating objects, especially NURBS, the center of origin is very important. So I'm going to go into Create, and I'll select my Curve tool, CV Curve tool, and I'm going to create the profile of my tire. Now, once I reach the middle point, I will try to do the same on this side. The curvature happens on the third quadrant. So 1, 2, 3. I'll try to do the same. That looks fine. Click Enter. I'm going to turn on my grid. And the good thing is, because we just created it close to the origin, we now have the pivot point on the right place. So now I want to go ahead and duplicate this geometry all the way around to create my tire. In order to do so, I will go into Surfaces, Revolve, Option Box. Let me reset my settings, making sure everything is fine. Instead of revolving in Y, I'll go ahead and revolve in X. So that way it's revolving around its axis on the X orientation. I make sure everything else is good, and I click Apply. X that out when you're done. And now we can select the curve, and we can scale it down or up. At this point, I'm happy with my object, and if I no longer want to make any changes to it, I can delete the history so that this curve no longer influences my object. To do so, I want to select my object and go to Edit, Delete by, History. Now, if I select my curve and I change it around, it will not influence my object. At this moment, we're just going to hide this curve. So if I go into my outliner, select my curve, and do Control H to hide it. Let's take the geometry and scale it to the reference. So I'll bring back up my image planes. Actually, let me go into my side view. It's going to be easier to do that there. And I'll scale down my object, just like so. Once I'm done, I'm going to bring this back to the origin. And I'm doing it manually, but you can go here and just switch all this to 0, all the translates, and it will go to the origin. As a matter of fact, this is actually more accurate. So just translate X, Y, and Z, make sure they're all 0. And at this point, we're going to do something called freeze transformations. What this does is that on the future, as I keep adding to this wheel or to the elements of the tire, I'll be able to keep them all on the same space. Whatever I create, the pivot point, for instance, will always be on the middle, on the center. To do that, I will go Modify, Freeze Transformation. And when I do that, notice how my scale comes back to 1. This is useful, especially when you're creating 3D objects that you're probably gonna be duplicating within your scene.